our mathematics dress and undress process amongst humanity that I really want us to listen to with our communications, technology, with the scientific reasons that the earth is so disrupted and that processes on the earth are so sometimes dysfunctional, and that countries find themselves really at war sometimes because of the process that, to my terminology today, are the human brain communication of the human being on earth. And because the human brain communication functions in our days and years more around technology, more around television, more around the education system that includes our schools, our primary school education, our secondary schools, our university studies. And because the world finds itself so dysfunctioned and so much in poverty by all of the requirements that technology requires of humanity. Scientifically, how humanity are intertwined with technology in the universeness of how the earth functions and can function in a fine way. How humanity in certain countries have tried to manipulate the countries and the earth and the world into poverty, into wars, into oppressions, and how humanity has tried to manipulate the amazing communication that are technology amongst humanity. We have the requirement that Arabia elites are required to educate people who functions around the processes that they sit and own businesses that are exactly the logical way of implementing a process in a country that might affect the country's people and might affect a different country, and they sometimes want to manipulate the process. Then Arabia elites have the requirement to educate that the dysfunction on earth are non-acceptable. I really do not agree with dysfunction. I really do not agree with oppressions. I really do not agree with abuses. I really do not agree with wars. Sometimes we get angry at one another in the world, and everyone wants to say their say, and everyone wants to feel that they have to defend themselves. But I do not agree with how humanity wants to dysfunction one another in how they find themselves wanting to defend themselves in this world. And only because of that, I'm rephrasing the whole education system that functions around the 1+1 mathematical function on earth. In one of my previous videos, I have mentioned that the 1+1 education that I have received in primary school, New Orleans, Vail, South Africa, Paul. And while I was at New Orleans Vail Primary School, I was required to stay a year behind in year 1. I was required to stay a year behind in year 2. I went to New Orleans Vail a year earlier than I would normally go, so that in my logical way of listening to the education, I was probably the little girl that wanted to listen further to, why can't I get the 1+1 function? There is such a logical education function, and that starts somewhere and takes you on a certain journey. How do I get it wrong? And how can't I listen the same way that a different child in the classroom listens to the same education function? And while I stayed a year behind in year 1 and year 2 at New Orleans Vail Primary School, I had the requirement to listen differently with all that the children at New Orleans Vail School those years were challenged with. And I remember those years when we were young, there was children kidnappings, and we had to run from school, and our parents had to be in employment because our households had the requirement to be funded for. And I remember my papa being deceased, and we then moved to Chicago, where I then was the little girl, and my brother Anton and our children was the little children by New Orleansville Primary School those years. And I remember with all the European movements to South Africa, my mama had friends that looks like white European. Our family line has green eyes, and we didn't know that they were also staying in Paul. And my mama Anna Philander found herself in Paul, where everyone was then functioning under the one communication that requires the earth to function in a way that is fine and fair for everyone. Not realizing those years where war countries are at and how countries are looking, and how the South Africans has traveled to South Africa. I remember then having to run numerous times while children were kidnapped. And we walked from school. And where the school was, there was an important road. And in that road was a few houses of people that looked like Europeans that were my mother's very own friends. And while they were more looking like white Europeans, and we didn't know that the Europeanness was also in our family line, and my mother was looking more like an African American, and the discussion in South Africa was that there was processes happening, and the children had to be running for the safety of their day. And while my mother educated me to not be scared, and while I had to listen in the completeness of how the universe requires me to listen to find myself fine while I was a little girl, so that I learned to be fine in a world that are still functioning under apartheid war process of many years ago. I was called to Auckland, New Zealand, not by someone, but by the technological function that I met my husband in an interesting way while I was a bartender. And while I met him, he came into the hotel and he was already on his way to New Zealand. And he found interest in me, and I immediately look around that evening and I find interest in him. And immediately technology were communicating to us. And immediately I found myself on that plane to Auckland, New Zealand, in a road where New Zealand has built a road that is the same kidnapping road, built in the same constructive way that I found myself when I was at New Orleansville Primary School, of the little girl that was kidnapped those years, of the little girl that the cars drove over her head and her brain was outside, of the little girl that I had to find my way through what life requires of me. And when New Zealand had me stayed in two houses. The one house was in Great South Road. The second house is our current house in Jutland Road in Manerua. New Zealand is busy managing a process that are so oppressive to me in this house. The technology communications that are overriding my human communication in this house is so disruptive to my day. And someone is still trying to ride over me also in the whole process of how they have driven over the little girls in this world and how they function around manipulating processes amongst humanity. And we do not now speak to one individual people, but we speak to the whole teams and the general human communication that are today also technology in our days. We speak to the teams that were really having arguments that is apartheid in those years. We speak to the teams that are really not in apartheid anymore, but are sometimes trying to oppress a Rabia Elise, that is the baby born from the different European family lines, from different family lines that my mama Anna Philander looked like so many countries today, that people are still trying to override me so that they can really get the communication line and hold it in their own hands because they want to manipulate the function of the universe and the birthness of humanity on earth. And because of the function that are so clearly explained to humanity, that when you implement an education system on earth, and the education system functions in a way where we get into the classroom in primary school, the number one communication is now not only the child's parent communication, no. It's now also technology in the house. It's also the teacher communicating in the classroom. It's also the requirement for the scientific process of school and of education functions to acknowledge where the earth and the universe are intertwined with one another. And when someone tried to manipulate the whole communication process, because many people have studied the process for years. Many people have found a way to manipulate the process for years. Many people have found a way to earn money and the completion of how the celebrity house in America functions around the Mama Anna Philander communication and birth room. There is now South African born. There is now also European. There is now also from Africa. There is now also the blonde with the green eyes amongst humanity. There is now a baby Rabia Elise in the Mama Anna Philander's house process. And when the world chased after me, Rabia Elise about it, and the world tried to oppress my day about it, and the world knows how to manage the process in a fine way for everyone. And the world want to tell themselves that they rather accept a Tony Braxton in the world that has a mother that might look like a Mama Anna Philander, or it might be people that are acting in America's celebrity house. And when the world tells themselves that Oprah Winfrey might look like Mama Anna Philander, but they really don't care, they want to distract the Mama Anna Philander's house in a way that they fall to force a quietness over the house as if the family was never born amongst humanity. Then I have a requirement to acknowledge the state that the world finds themselves at. And when the world finds themselves in so much oppressions, because they want to dysfunction, not only now with technological communication, but like I explained on my Evoke Fashion book, they want to dysfunction a womb that is a human function on earth, that are intertwined with the amazing process of the universe. And when the universe functions in such amazingness, and someone tries to dysfunction the whole function of the universe by trying to manipulate every part of the process in every step of the way that they can, and they run after mirabilis without realizing where they are headed when they're running after me, then I have a requirement to educate on my Evoke business all that I've educated. And I have a requirement to request that whoever the oppressor under these communications are, that are trying to manipulate the amazing function of mankind in the great communications of the universe, that manipulator finds way to listen to what I educate in my season. They find way to understand where they are at in their communications about Mama Anna Philander's house, and they find way to implement the fair requirement that the house functions with and are birthed on this earth. That no way can humanity tell themselves every day while they look at wars and poverties and oppressions that the one is more inferior than the other, that the one looks more better than the other, that the one is more this than the other. In Mama Anna Philander's house, I've explained we are 7 children that's born in the womb. And in the amazingness of the womb, we function in a way that is fair and fine for everyone. And we really sometimes require that when the world learns from our households and the world knows that the function in the world are a dress and undress function, then learn to know how do you all manage a dress and undress function. And where we are headed with this discussion is that my explanation was that a dress and undress mathematical process that are simple as a 1+1 education function that requires the earth to have education systems and processes in place so that the earth can be fine, so that the universe are non-dysfunctional and disrupted. And when the earth implements a 1+1 function, then the earth recognizes that the 1+1 education function is now not only a classroom of children, kids that are now the baby in the communication of a 1+1 education that is the most simplest education amongst humanity. But for a baby, the baby doesn't understand the education function of a 1+1 sometimes, and the baby even forgets the answers. And by the time that the baby forgets what 1+1 are in the classroom, then the baby doesn't forget because they forget. It is because the baby's requirement are to function in the completeness of what the universe requires them. And when I failed my first year at New Orleans Vale Primary School, and I was seen as maybe the person who's the dumbest, but I had to listen with all accuracy. I had to listen to the differences of how the mathematical function in primary school now explained to me, and I logically can't accept and understand what the teachers are saying. And because I logically could not grasp what was happening in the mathematical class, I had to allow myself time over the years to listen to what is it that humanity finds themselves so much challenged with on earth. And while I had the experience that I have to listen to, and while humanity have tried to tell themselves that the one is more inferior than the other, and that's a day on earth for any human being or the other, then Rabia Elise have a firm and direct requirement to everyone that told themselves that this earth is the way that anyone wants it on any day. That everyone who functions under the education system, has a right to acknowledge the church educations also. The church educations that are requirement right from wrong when we listen to all that we do on earth and our opportunities of choices that we learn at being human beings. And when we function under the offices of that, and we require a vote business to educate your office without a photo where a vote business sits with a leg up when she educates a leading this generation education. And the whole bum is out and the whole world has to look at it. And she was a church prophetess before I started my vote business. When I had to learn of how humanity requires me to acknowledge the office in the world, to acknowledge the church on this earth, to acknowledge the education system on this earth, to acknowledge the processes of wars, to acknowledge the poverty circumstances, then I cannot agree with how I have been oppressed and manipulated under a communication function that began at my New Orleansville primary school, and still I find myself in the day of that same oppressive communication where someone wanted to oppress me under that same education and communication function on earth. Then my vote business is exactly a person who was a prophetess a year or 2 years ago or 3 years ago, and a fashion person who educates fashion in the same season. Then my education is none different to be recognized under that under the 1+1 logical way of reasoning, logical way of listening, logical way of what we are required to do as human beings on earth, logical way of how we are required to function on earth. We do not educate ourselves to disrupt one another's day, but we do not educate ourselves that the Mama Anna Philander's house, according to humanity, doesn't exist because we want to have the world the way that we want to have it. We do not educate ourselves. I remember numerous times how my brother Zach are trying to get his funds in South Africa for his business. I remember numerous times how my sister Antoinette has traveled to South Africa to manage her own business so that she can pay for children's university studies, because the pace that the world are trying to oppress households with, we do not agree with. I remember how many times my vote business was now not funded, and I have been educated in the most logical, most required education that we educate an international world in a season that our generation are experiencing. And because the world wants to throw a blind eye, the world wants to close their ears, the world wants to dysfunction how they want to, the world wants to bomb one another the way they want to, I, Rabia Elise, the baby of the seventh birth, communication of my Mama Anna Philander's womb, says that I acknowledge myself, and then I recognize my birth womb, and that I acknowledge the education that humanity have been introduced when they were introduced to a Mama Anna Philander's house on earth. And that when they look at American Celebrity House, when they look at how fit the Maoris are, when they look at the green eyes of our family line and the Europeanness of that, when they look at my brother Richard Philander and my cousin Ricardo Blignot that looks like Chinese young little boys, when they look at how our family's birth womb are amongst humanity, then humanity don't educate themselves to try and disrupt a Rabia Elise under such a process. Humanity don't run after me to try and harm a baby Rabia Elise under such a communication and education. But humanity listens to, what do I educate them about? The 1+1 mathematical function, that is, you cannot dress a person and then undress them at the same time. You cannot send me through a Oostenburg Lodge that was a European hotel that has a Nibblebit that were Europeans from Europe, that has a Boerland builder that called me to be employed there, that has Europeans in the office, and everyone say they didn't know where Rabia was about in all of those communications. They don't know where technology was at in all of those communications. Then Rabia Elise says, you do not dress me and chase after me with crazy manipulative technological communications, and then you try to oppress me in Auckland, New Zealand, and then you try to silence my vote business, and I look like the prophetess that was now the most craziest in the world, and now I educate fashion. And then you acknowledge me, the human being, Rabia Elise, in all of my birth womb. and to implement my required education that I'm required to educate humanity, how to function under the most simplest communication in the universe. That is the education function, that is the prison cells, that is the courtroom, that is the right from wrong, that is the church education, that is the wars, that is every house that are being built and provided for against the poverty circumstances in the world. And when the churches and the education system and technology and the lawyers in the courtroom imprisons half of the world to disrupt the world so that someone can be oppressed in it, then the world listens to how do we function under the 1+1 function that requires us to acknowledge every individual on this earth. And when we are required to acknowledge everyone, we are required to listen to how does the world functions under the education system that includes the technological processes, that includes our households, that includes how households are provided for, that includes how the earths are being built, that includes how the earth functions, and we function in a communication that is fair and fine under the education system of this world. And I know that I say a lot, and I say it with loudness, and I say it with harshness to everyone. Because when I look like aggressed and oppressed under that process, and everyone that manages it tells me that they are doing something good. And while they are doing something good, they are disrupting half of the world out. Then something good means listen to my explanations, implement what's required. But my first explanation is that dress and undress is a technological process where technology functions from in the universe, and whoever is managing technology, that are the cell phones, that are television on earth, that are every technological communication, but I mainly now speak about the cell phone and television communications. When technology functions under the dress and undress communication line in the universe, and the dress and undress communication line functions under the 1+1 mathematical function that you find under the education function in the universe, but there is education technological function on earth. When the function functions in a way that the technology has a cell phone and it has a television. When cell phone communicates to the human brain that are Rabia Elise, then television needs to step aside. By the time that Rabia puts her cell phone on, then television is either playing and Rabia's attention is on the mobile phone, but the communications in the universeness of how humanity manages the communication to my Rabia Elise's brain communication is that they manage it in a way that are fine for me. Proven that there are people that have got control over how the communications go to me, specifically Rabia Elise. Dress and undress cannot function under one communication. It's two different applications. When the communication of a cell phone comes through, then the communication of a telephone, a television channel, or putting on a television program needs to not come through at the same time. That's the most logical, that technology people, that China, that America, that South Africa, that Europe can manage the process. It is when technology communications comes through and the person are being told to pick up their cell phone, then the television communication can't be managed under the same one communication. Dress and undress cannot function under the same communication line. I've mentioned something logical, that is, if you get dressed, then you are dressed. You cannot be undressed at the same time. We sit in a world where people are being abused, where people are being raped, because dress and undress are functioning under one communication line in the universe. Dress and undress means we dress Mama Anna Philander's house. It's one of the most amazing birthrooms on earth. We educate the Braxton family values. China designs Rabia's clothes, and China don't know it's for Rabia, but China designs it for everyone. And South Africa works on the education system, and Rabia goes to New Orleansville, and Rabia sits at Libertywood, and Rabia gets the employment at Bull and Boulder, and it sails higher, and Rabia moves to New Zealand. And then where's the Vogue business noticed at it? Where's the Vogue business acknowledged at it? Dress and undress cannot function under one communication in the universe. I found myself on an educational journey. I'm on an evoke business where I'm educating the world to understand the process that they're managing that includes technology. And the world wants to oppress me in my household while I'm educating them. New Zealand wants to bring circumstances of poverty into my household because they want to oppress my mama Anna Philander's communication in the universe Nasabat. And New Zealand has messed with my name. New Zealand has shifted my name through all of their peoples and social media and entertainment television teams. I know Television New Zealand have dismissed 70 people. But the oppressions that has happened in my house, I really do not agree with. I feel that everyone who feels that they are building the wall, not in a Boland Bolded way, because when I got to Boland Bolded was arguing with Bilko, and Bilko was also the Muslims from Dubai, and the Muslims has had their arguments, and because Boland Bolded's manager was already in those arguments in the world, and he was a European manager, and by the time I got employed there, the communication was already part of the dress and undress process that runs under the same communication line on earth. And while Boland Boulder tried to dress me in the most amazing human resources job of being the human resource officer of Boland Boulder, coming from Nibblebits being the most amazing human resources person. At Nibblebits, they said, why don't you all give Rabia's salary increase? The manager said, no, only a 2,000 rand a month. The people at the office said, so many work for only a 2,000 rand a month, dress and undress under the same function. And New Zealand came and they tried that same communication around me with my evoke business, with messing with my finances, with aggressing my house with technological communications. And New Zealand said, but they've learned it from somewhere, and it's maybe China doing it or maybe American. Rabia Lee says, but I'm the person that are being affected by all of these oppressions while I'm doing an amazing education amongst humanity. When I have to do a live stream video and I'm loud and I have to explain things that I really sometimes feel to explain in a better way, but I'm being oppressed to do the live stream video. Like the American celebrity house that now looks like the most drunken process on the earth. And the American celebrity says that they rather accept a Tony Braxton than accepting a Rabia Elise and an Antoinette. And the world tried to oppress our household under that one communication of dressing the world and undressing humanity in the same time. But then the only thing I say that in the most simplest way of explaining to everyone that are really fixing this problem, that under the mathematical communication of technology, there are the same education under education system of schools. There are the primary schools' number one education. There are the 1+1 function on earth. There's a code, and the code is a 1+1 code. And the 1+1 code are not only a mathematical code, but it's a communication between the human brain and between technology and televisions. And under the 1+1 code, I explain it now to the Chinese people that are managing technology. Under the 1+1 code, the 1+1 code requires two different reactions. When television communications come through, the code, you give television some time, and then cell phone communications comes through. And individually, every household and every person are recognized under the 1+1 mathematical function that officers are also functioning on. And if someone really wants to fix the poverty state in the world, and they really want to get countries out of war, then they would really go and find out and implement what I'm really telling them today. That technologically you go to the number one education that communicates to the human brain. And that number one communication next to the human brain's natural logical functioning in the universe are today technology and television communications. And when you address the human being, then you either decide if the human being Rabia is at an office today, And you want to communicate to her under office communication, that is the little girl that was in primary school, that when the communication of 1+1s were explained to the whole class, then Rabia was either in the room or not in the room. And either in the room or not in the room doesn't mean a woman being kidnapped, dressed and undressed at the same time. Either in the room means Rabia was getting the same communication that everyone else in the classroom got, or Rabia was not probably getting the same communication. And then Rabia really knew what 1+1 was after the mathematical exams. Or I really didn't know. But in our logical explanation of today's daily lives, that there's a communication that comes to the human being. And when the communication goes to the human being, technology steps aside and communicates at a different time, and the human being listens under the universe requirements at a different time. When the human beings sometimes find themselves at offices, then they might sometimes be under all the communications that required at an office. And that includes a Siri that can talk, and an AI that can talk, and everything about the technological robot notification that you can hear sometimes, and the cell phone goes on a soft, and the cell phone sometimes is on a loud. And when the human being have to function under that one loud or soft communication, and technology either gets it right or they don't get it right, and the person is not at the office, then do not account the person to be at the office. There's absenteeism and there's being at work. Do not account Rabia to be in the office, and then you put her under office communications. By the time that I'm done in my house and I had to logically listen, I couldn't function normally because my house was full of office communications while I was actually managing my business at home. And then managing my business at home means at the time that a cell phone communication comes through, then television communication don't come through at the same time. Under the most simplest explanation of where y'all can go and fix that aggressive poverty circumstance on earth, is that y'all can't communicate from two different functions and communications at the same time. Where is it fixed? Under the mathematical function and software technology. I would explain it in the most easiest way. And under the software technology is a 1+1 communication function that I explained to the schools when the children sit in the classrooms. And it's almost like an AI robot or like technology. And the robot talks to the children, the teacher talks, and the listening requirement of the children in the same room. China posted something on my post last time that said the listening requirement. And under that listening room, that where the human being sits and has to listen, then we all educate and say that while we have to listen in so many different listening responses, that don't have technology override that 1+1 functioning under the education system that we learn. That is, not everyone went to the mathematics class and not everyone went to the science class. Not everyone is going to be able to function on a fast pace we learned at Stanford Plaza, and not everyone is going to be able to function, on a normal pace. When I vote business are minutes from home, it's minutes from home. The hours are not disclosed, and no one can say that Rabia is now obliged to be under the oppressive lots of communications that technology gives you on any day or the other. And when you communicate through to a simple Rabia Elise's house, then do not communicate all at once under one communication. And that when you all fix the problem on earth, the problem are fixed under the 1+1 mathematics communication that goes to schools and to communications of schools that forms part of technology. And when technology functions in the classroom, then it only functions in the classroom when it has to. And other than that, the human being has the normal daily communications. Some human being can function under all of those communications other human beings really say that there is more a way for the process to not disrupt humanity so. And the way for the process to not disrupt humanity so is have the process be on a pace that is a very slow 1+1 pace. And that according to the software installed on technology, when AI and Siri communicates to the human being, or when technology communicates to the human being, then the pace of technology, I say take a step back so that the pace of the technology does not chase the human being around on earth. And the pace of technology like you put a loudspeaker on and you put the radio softer. You play a fast forward and you play a soft recording. And the pace of that are found under the 1+1 mathematical function that derives from the technology system in the humanness of humanity that manages cell phones on earth. And that manages cell phone and television communications on earth. So to the teams of y'all that are managing cell phone and television communications, if you really want to fix the problem, Rabia say go to the mathematical communication. And under the mathematical communication is the 1+1 communication, not to the 0 communication to strike people down, because 0 sometimes really means 0. You go and put the technological communication under the 1+1 communication. And Rabia doesn't say go and make it a more fast pace, because it's already on a pace that as human beings, we are moving too fast for our generation's time. And under the mathematical communication is the same communication that is technology, that is the cell phone in the house. And under the cell phone in the house communication is the same communication that it was on the primary school. The 1+1 education. And under the 1+1 communication is the office communication of the world. And not everyone sits in an office. And if the office people feel oppressed for working 40 hours, then find a way to deal with it. But don't argue with the world with making technologies on such a fast pace. And under the office communication of the world, the cell phones are next to people in their offices. And while people are sitting and independently working in their offices, then cell phones are one thing and computers are another thing. And the human being functions independently. 1+1 is not 3. Thank you, someone. That's a very good one. And because 1+1 is not 3, we don't communicate on a pace that is, there's 3 processes that happens under the office. And under the office is 1+1 mathematical. You have to have an education to use the computer in the office sometimes. And some people today sit with their cell phones next to them. And the cell phone AI communication cannot communicate to us at the same time. And for the cell phone communication teams that manage cell phones on earth, you put the cell phone communication right under the 1+1 mathematical system. Dress and undress cannot function under one communication, under the human brain communication on earth or in the universe, Nasabat. On earth meaning the people that manages technology next to the human brain communication. You cannot communicate to us 2 different things at the same time. So those people that sends communication through, let's get it right. Dress and undress under the mathematical, educational, office communication that schools functions under office itself. School is a business that functions under office itself. And under the one function is technology. And the office is a building, and the human being is a human being. And the human being functions in different colors and ways, like we educate and evoke fashion. And when we function in different colors and ways, and the processes that we function through are managed by certain human beings on earth, that is also technology. And then technology don't send us a communication at the same time that a television or a computer communication comes through. Let's make it that easier. Let's explain it that easier. And if you can fix it under there, then everyone would be on a fine place. For the cars, technically, we can't say the car computers, people who drive cars, their communications. All we say is, first of all, I say independently get technology, the cell phones and the television communications right. And from there, people can get all the other communications right. That the human brain receives communication by. Dress and undress cannot function under one communication. It functions under the mathematical communication of 1+1. That are the very first human mathematical communication that humanity received in primary school. And the most easier and logical explanation of how humanity can manage the process and get the functioning on earth right. And under the 1+1 mathematical communication, the human being received the communication from technology. And the human being decides to respond. When the human being responds, then the human being responds independently. And then technology doesn't stand in line with the human being that responds. Technology doesn't halfway know sometimes how the human being are going to respond. So when the human being receives a technology communication, individually send the communications through at different times. And a pace as slow as a 1+1 mathematical explanation. And even then, sometimes a 1+1 mathematical explanation can be scientific knowledge when you are a little baby and when you are a human being in the communications of the universe. So when you communicate with technology to our human brains, and then find out whether there's other communications that also comes through to us at the same time. And try to independently send a cell phone notification communication through. When a cell phone is on silent, and you cannot hear your cell phone having a notification, and technology takes time to tell you, go and check your mobile phone. And then try and check if there's a television communication at that same time. And the pace of that is a 1+1 mathematical pace. Why don't we say a 0+1? Because if we acknowledge the 0, then some people are gonna wipe and strike one another down. We are currently functioning under the 0+1 communication. And humanity needs to function under the 1+1 communication. 0+1 means humanity strikes one another down the whole time. When someone else is dressed, another person is strike down. Someone else is dressed, another person. When someone else receives food on the table, then another person is strike down. And we need to function under the 1+1 technical communication that was ever explained in the education system of the primary school education. That's it for everyone with that explanation. I don't want to say too much because I really want to share the video through. We're going to share a bit more under our explanation of dress and undress cannot function under the same communication at the same time. For those people who are fixing it, amazing and great, do that. And for those people who are trying to manipulate the world about it, really manipulation is really not acceptable in the world. I require that everyone manages processes in a fine way for everyone. Thank you, everyone. Have a good day. Sponsor Vogue Business and sponsor my Rabia Elise projects. Have an amazing day.